Of which? I don't know. Let me get up and see. Oh. I'm much too young to feel this darn old. Well, I like it pretty good. Where do you think he's going, bud? That was good, but we couldn't hear you. Over here at Gotmilke1's house, if you don't believe it, there he is. And it occurred to us that we need to do a little walk around video of each of our trucks so everybody knows what's up. This is his truck. It's got the wide wheels on it. It's got the custom patina paint.
Took years to create that.
That's right. This isn't just a overnight project here. Up under the hood there is a 4.3 V6. It's bored out what? 40. And it's got a couple power adders on it. But before we get to that, let's go inside and see what's up on the inside of the truck. The cockpit, so to speak. All right, inside the truck, he's got the original carpet in it and seat with a seat cover, because much like most square bodies these days, seat's a little raggedy, but mine was too. And he has just recently built a custom dash with this tachometer, speedometer. That's one that's run by GPS. Stop me when I'm lying here, Gotmilke. And of course, oil pressure, volts, and so on and so forth.
Fuel, yes, fuel. 2 boost gauges and an air fuel ratio gauge.
That's right. And a 6-ball shifter. That's what kind of transmission is that? 5-speed?
That's a New Venture 3500 5-speed out of a half-ton early 90s truck.
Of course, you had to hang the pedals. It was a 700 R4 originally.
Oh, good.
I'm using a different camera than what I'm used to. Hopefully, I'll get through it. Up under the hood here, he's going to have to stop me when I start lying again. That's a supercharger off of, what is it off of?
3.8 Ford V6 Super Coupe.
Put Ford parts on this thing?
I don't know. It's made by Eaton. It's just was resided on a Ford at some point.
So you telling me I got outrun by Ford parts?
That could happen.
Just don't seem right, does it? Anyways, I'm getting sidetracked. Go ahead.
So to mount the supercharger, built a custom tunnel built out of 4-inch steel square tube. Flange top and bottom. I put a blow-off valve in it in case it backfires.
And that is, let me get around the other side where you can see it real good.
That's located here. Top plate's been gusseted, and it just bolts to the carb flange of an Edelbrock intake.
Do we know what pounds of boost the springs overcame?
We do not. We know they popped off a time or two, judging from the oil and such around them, but I just turned the screws down until they felt snug. Mm-hmm. Up front, 2 58mm turbochargers, eBay style.
What's the AR ratio?
0.50 on the turbine, on the compressor housings, and I think 0.62 on the exhausts.
Mm-hmm.
Then one single Predator carburetor. Predator carburetor is a variable Venturi, 390 to 930 CFM on engine demand.
And it seems big enough so far.
Seems big enough so far. My air fuel ratio gauge says I'm pretty rich in most places. I do have a cam kit for the carburetor, which will change how much fuel goes in per bit of air, but I've not drove it enough to to know what it needs. The little boy's here helping us out.
What's on your mind, man?
It's his truck. He feels like it's his truck.
All right, well, we'll let him get it.
Anyway, the engine's a 92 model roller cam engine. The engine that was in it was trashed. Pulled it apart to rebuild it. When it went to knocking, and it was trashed. So I started with a new block. It had a little bit of rust damage, is the only reason I bored it. But aside from that, it's pretty regular.
You put a cam in it too, didn't you?
I did put a cam in it.
What sort of cam?
My engine man said he'd grind me one. I don't know what it is, to be honest with you.
Just stop.
I think it's above stock, but it's not much more. I told him I wanted to limit RPMs below 5,000. 4.3s inherently have a weak crankshaft because it has a split rod journal. They offset the journal to make the 6-cylinder an even fire engine. So the rod journals are brittle on them, which makes them the weak part of this engine. This has got a stock cast crank in it. So I told him I wanted to limit RPMs because if you turn it too fast, you're going to break the crank. Now, with the boost levels I was seeing, it's a wonder I didn't break the crank. But so far it's still intact, so pretty happy about that.
That's right.
So the turbos, I've been asked on how I mounted the turbos, and I don't know if, well, I can illustrate. Give me just a sec. This is a manifold off of 4.3. And I've heard people say a 4.3 is a 350 with 2 cylinders shaved off, and that's not exactly true. Otherwise, these 2 ports would be together like they're on a small block. But they're not. So this is a manifold that would go on either side because both heads are built exactly the same. So if I wanted to turn this around, I can't because the ports change. Turn them upside down if you switch sides, but you can't turn them opposite side. So luckily this engine had tubular headers on it. So what I did is I cut those headers apart and I re-welded them, moving the positions of these so I could turn them up instead of turn down. And that is how I made the headers for the turbos. Bought a T3 flange and created the rest with the factory pieces. There's your illustration. Other custom work is the carb flange. It's made out of 3-inch exhaust pipe and a piece of 1/2-inch plate steel. And on top of that plate steel, I put a spacer to get me up over the top. In one of my videos, there's some pretty good video of that, pictures of that, but the fab work was extensive, let's say.
But you did it without a mill or anything.
I did it with no special tools.
Just a grinder and a torch and all.
Funny story, I do own a TIG welder. I bought one several years ago and I haven't learned how to use it yet. So everything was done with my old trusty Miller 100 amp 110 volt wire feed welder. I did upgrade the welder to a MIG. It's got a tank on it with gas, but aside from that, all the fab work was done with that. The exhaust leaving the turbos, this 3-inch exhaust pipe that was left over from my son's build. We put a 3-inch exhaust on his truck. It's a Summit build your own exhaust kit, so I had some bends left over.
Which I had good luck with those. I use them on a few cars.
I've had very good luck with those, so I used the leftover bends to make the exhaust.
They were mandrel bent too.
Brought them out the front fenders. It is a tad loud for cruising, but it's not unbearable. In fact, the DeSoto is louder than this. So turbos, turns out they make pretty good mufflers. So,
which is the #1 reason folks install them on their cars.
It is. It's a pretty good reason too.
Yeah.
So other custom work would be the belt drive. Belt drive to run this supercharger was a bit tricky. It was harder than I anticipated it being, and the reason was because everything flexed. So I started out with a serpentine drive, which I bought from Mr. Heavy Chevy, by the way. off of, I think, a late 80s, early 90s. It's a steel setup.
I gave him steel on it too.
He did. He gave me a good deal. But I put an idler at the top where the tensioner used to be, and I moved the tensioner down the side where the air pump used to be. And when I went to put the belt on it, every part of this flexed, and I couldn't get any belt tension on it. So I ended up putting braces just about everywhere on this thing to make it so it would stay put. Once I got it braced up, I still don't have a lot of tensioner on it. That it grabs by about 3/8 of an inch. So and it's a bit tricky to put a belt on. So funny story, at the race I threw a belt when I was racing my wife, and I lost, by the way. In order to put the belt on, I have to take this idler pulley.
Cut the light on there.
Oh,
so we can
sorry.
So we can see what's what.
You have to take this idler pulley loose so it will lay to the side. Pull the tensioner down here all the way out so it's not interfering with the belt at all. And you can just slip the belt over the round edge of this pulley. Once you do that, then you tighten this bolt back up and it pulls it straight, because this is mounted on a nice meaty piece of steel. So when you tighten that bolt up, it pulls it back straight. But it's kind of extensive. I even burned my arm doing it. But race day, that happened. It took me about 35 minutes to put a belt on it, but we put another belt on it and we went. So if I was to do this again, I'd probably come up with a little better tensioner system. But thus far, this one's working pretty good. The belt that was on it, I felt, was compromised. It had a bad squeak to it because it had run off at one point in time.
You could hear it squeaking in the beginning videos.
It had a twist in it. So,
you know that one race where I beat you?
Yeah, that's the one. So another point is when the truck's cold, which this truck was cold during the first race because we trailered it to the track. It's a bit lean when it's cold. And
mine
it'll
does
stall
the same
if
thing.
you're not careful. So that's pretty much the build. Again, I put a cam in it and I put good pistons in it. And after I tore it up with excessive boost pressure, pushed the head gaskets out pretty much straight away. I did put head studs and steel head gaskets in it, but the hard parts or the basic parts of the engine are GM factory stuff. So
there is some other cool stuff you done, like you put your extra gauges out here.
well, I did. So I rigged up those gauges for the startup. Wanted to make sure I could keep an eye on it, and then
You got some circuit breakers here.
these are relays for the fans. So what I found out was that I wired both fans on one relay and it couldn't hold it. So I ended up buying a second relay and putting a circuit breaker on each one. So the fans are individual.
What kind of fans are they?
They came with the radiator. So I don't know if you watched all my videos, but I had been saving a radiator for quite some time down in the shed because it was a nice big radiator and it looked brand new when I pulled it out of the van. But I put it in here and poured water in it and it poured straight back out on the floor.
That's what happens to me all the time.
And after looking it over, I decided that I was probably going to be just as far ahead to buy a new one as to fix that one because it had about 5 broken flues on it. So by the time I'm not a solderer, so by the time you take that to a radiator shop and get them to solder it, then I bought this.
And there ain't many radiator shops left anymore.
I bought this aluminum radiator with 2 electric fans. It had a shroud on it, but it wouldn't fit in this particular configuration, so I had to abandon it. But I think it was $200, and it's just what I needed to do because time was getting short. So I did make some custom catch cans. I don't know if you got those on video. Let me turn my light back up. I made some oil catch cans. Then I hooked them to the valve cover because in a boosted application you get some blow by even with a healthy engine, and that blow by can sometimes move a lot of oil, which makes a bad mess. So I made these catch cans, and they're currently vented to atmosphere through a filter. I may go ahead and hook them to the air cleaner when I do something else with that. Right now this filter is actually just sitting straight on top of the carburetor because if you put a bottom housing on it, it didn't fit under the hood. So I've got really no way to plumb that in without doing something different. I may do a remote air filter or something in the future, but for the time being, this kept my mostly belt chips from the supercharger out of my carburetor, and it slips the belt enough where it makes a little bit of rubber in here. So, or it was when it was making a lot of boost. So actually in the last week I figured out how to turn the boost down on it.
He's got over here on this here side, if we don't trip over the little guy's cars. He's got a boost controller. What sort of boost control is that?
It's a cheap Chinese boost controller, and
they put the plus on the wrong side, did they?
well, I don't know if they put the plus on the wrong side, or I'm just not smart enough to blow through it while I was adjusting it. But either way, I had it closed off, so I feel more better about it now.
Yeah, that's good. I've done dumb stuff, you know, once or twice.
Once or twice?
Yeah. What's this here for?
That would be the clutch master cylinder. I put a hydraulic clutch in this application because the New Venture 3500 has an integrated bell house, and it does not have provisions to put a bell crank mechanical style clutch in it. So you're pretty much married to a hydraulic clutch if you want to use one. And as I can attest, I've heard rumors that they're not terribly strong if you stress them hard, and I broke the one in the DeSoto. That is the same transmission I have in this truck. So I think it lived up till now because I broke everything else in the drivetrain.
By the way, in the drag race, I was running that Firebird, which has a little bit of sauce. Not much, but a little bit. A Saginaw transmission. Didn't break it. Everybody said they're junk.
Well, put sticky tires on it and you'll break something.
Oh, we'll break something if we do that.
So I have broke just about everything else in the driveline of the DeSoto up to this point.
All right, we had camera malfunctions, and the malfunction is I don't know how to run my camera. That's the first time I really used it. I've had it for a couple of years. But
John Boy did pretty good with it at the racetrack.
that's right. Where do we leave off at? We were getting ready to put her up on the lift, I think.
Yeah, I can put it up.
Let's put it up on the lift and we'll see what's up underneath it. We can look at the transmission. We can see that he ain't lying about it, what it is. And,
why would somebody think I'm lying?
And his lift will reach the frame, whereas mine won't. So we'll cut the camera back on once it's up in the air.
Oh.
All right, now we up under the blue loo. Who's blowing the blues down low, you know. And right there is your oil scavenger pump, which has saved the day from the big smokies. You know, one time you left, I couldn't see what you were racing beside you.
You know, one time I left racing the Duster, I think, and I red lighted both of us with the smoke. Which kind of sucks.
Oh, well. If don't nothing never happen, you won't never have no stories to tell.
That's right.
So, you got fancy parts up under here, braided lines and fittings.
Yeah, so
Looks like you got teed from the drains from the turbos into the pump, and then it comes back around here and runs back into the oil pan. I gotta watch I don't mash my new glasses.
So, turns out I got a friend who used to run race cars, and he's got boxes and boxes of AN fittings, which is pretty handy. So, the oil drain lines that I bought originally with the turbos, those I was hunting them in one of my videos because I misplaced them here in the shop somewhere. But those are these 10 AN10 lines. And he saw those one day. He was over here. And he said, "Why are you buying AN stuff? I got boxes." So when I went to do the oil pump, I said, "Think I'll go see the man with all the AN fittings." And he hooked me up. Got me all that stuff. So that was pretty cool. Hey, whoa, whoa, whoa. Give me back my braking rod. What are you doing, man?
That boy.
Come on now.
That boy.
That boy, he'll gather some stuff up now.
That's
You
all
see
right.
my bolt bend? Look at here.
Are they still organized
I'm
real
now
good?
keeping bolts in cardboard boxes because every time I put them in the racks, he rearranges them and I can't find any of them. He's helpful that way. All right, so stepping back here. Where'd you go?
I'm over here. I'm over here. Oh, we unplugged the light. That's all right. It was giving us a glare.
Giving you a glare. Giving me a glare too. Maybe because my glasses are scratched and kind of broke. Here is a New Venture 3500 transmission and a hydraulic slave cylinder. And it's nothing special. This is the same as the 400 turbo output shaft I got from my driveline guy, who I had to have cut this driveline. He cut me out of it, shortened it up, I think 7.5 inches from the 700 R4. New fuel tank. I think I had that in the video. And if you back up, you'll see my Holly Red fuel pump and cheap Chinese aluminum canister filter. My new used Interstate remanufactured, which I guess they take an old battery and just put a new sticker on it and call it remanufactured. Sell it to you for cheap. Battery's holding up pretty good in a Speedway Motors battery box. I did run some cables up into the bed right here in case I need to jump it off without having to crawl under the truck.
She's pretty stock under here.
Pretty stock. It's got the big 4-pack leaf springs on it. That's including the big fat one there.
Ooh, my truck's got more springs than that.
This was a light duty model, and I did take the rear end cover off and install a mini spool, and then
Saxophone.
I painted a saxophone on it because Blue Marini played the saxophone. So only makes sense. Aside from that, the shocks leak a little bit.
Probably
And
could use some new there.
it needs some new front shocks too. So I had intended on lowering this truck before the challenge ran up, but I struggled with my engine build so much that I didn't have time. So maybe this year I'll get it lowered. I don't know what else to show you underneath. That's pretty much it.
All right, well, let's see if mine will crank up. Maybe we'll drive it in.
Okay,